What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to the channel for another Battlefront 2 video. Today does actually seem to be kind of a repeat video because the last time I made a video similar to this was, I guess it was only a couple months ago, but they've made quite a few changes, and this is like kind of the final stage the game's ever going to be in. It did take me a little while to put this together, and that's why it's coming out so late, because they've known that it's going to be the final stage for a little while now, but it did take some time. So without further ado, let's get right into it. The first hero on our list is Chewbacca, and I'm going to break it down two different ways for the best star cards. We've got Supremacy or Galactic Conquest. Galactic Assault, actually, is what it's called, but we've got those two game modes. They're pretty similar in the star cards that you'll be needing, and then we've also got Heroes versus Villains or Hero Showdown. Those are the two categories we're going to break them up in. I'll start with the first one, which is Supremacy. The star cards you're going to want to run Chewie on are the first one, which is Bonus Health, giving you that extra 150 maximum health increase. It just makes Chewie a better rounded hero, and it in my opinion makes him playable, because without that 150 it becomes very difficult to get kills as Chewbacca and stay alive. The second star card for Supremacy you'll want is Echoing Roar, so you'll want that extended duration because there's a whole bunch of low health enemies. It's not a bunch of heroes running around, it's mostly NPCs and then a couple players here and there, but the players have less health than a hero would. So then that next one you want to look at is Impervious, and that one does a damage reduction. So this didn't used to exist. I don't think it existed in the last video I made about this, but I'm really glad it does now, because every 200 combined damage you get with any ability, you gain 2% damage reduction, and then it can go up to 34, so 16. What is it? I can't think how many kills that is. 34 divided by 2. That's how many kills it is. Not kills, but 200 damage. And that's pretty much killing a heavy, a specialist, a hero, or you don't even have to kill them. It just says damage them. So that's a big bonus, because it is actually kind of difficult to kill people with Chewie's new bowcaster. Before, it was just like the specialist Wookiee, where it had the 3 bolts going, and now you can aim, and it is a very targeted yet splash damage thing. 17, that's how many kills it is. Sorry, it just hit me. And then finally, the star card, I mean, you can only have 3 at a time, but the one that I would recommend swapping in and out is the Furious Resilience, and it's the received blaster damage reduction is by about 20%. So just while you've got that middle ability active, you receive 20% less damage. It's helpful here and there, but I typically leave it off and keep these big 3 right there. Then moving on to Heroes versus Villains, I still recommend keeping that bonus health, because it makes him a lot better of a hero to play. But what I do recommend is swapping out the Echoing Roar for Extended Shock, because the heroes have a whole lot more health than the base units will. So you'll want them to be frozen in place so you can get a couple solid headshots and maybe get them to half health. But you could also swap out the multi-shot grenade, and that's going to just extend that grenade. It won't extend the grenade any longer, but it'll give it a bigger radius, so you're more likely to shock multiple villains in one area. And again, that bowcaster now does explosive damage, so that's really helpful when trying to eliminate a hero. Last but not least, we're going to stick with Furious Resilience, and in this case, I pretty much constantly have the Furious Bowcaster ability active while playing Heroes versus Villains. If it's not active, I'm not typically looking to fight any of the villains. I try and avoid the fight until I have that ability back up, and then once I activate it, I get that 20% damage reduction while it's active. So if I'm standing there shooting a villain and they come over with the lightsaber, which most of them have, and start slashing me, I'll have that extra 20% damage reduction to maybe get a few more shots off and end up killing them rather than them kill me. Anyway, that's it for Chewie. Moving on to Han. Han is actually a pretty simple one. I don't really change too much. I typically recommend, for Supremacy at least, 2, which is sharpshooter, and it just helps with that rapid fire mode that he has. You can keep that active longer per shot that you fire. So every time you shoot it, it obviously goes down quicker than if you just have it active and you're not firing. This allows you to shoot it without it going down quite as quick. Then the second one I recommend is Airburst, and that one is essential even in heroes versus villains, because you want to throw that detonite charge just above someone that you're looking to damage, and then you want to activate it before it ever touches anything. You'll get that extra 20% damage done to them, which is a big help. And again, not just in Supremacy, but also heroes versus villains. The next one I like is Heavily Modified. I will rarely take this off for anything, regardless of the game mode. HVV, Supremacy, Galactic Assault, Showdown, it really doesn't matter. That extra 25% blaster heat that Han's gun can receive with this card is almost an essential card to have. And then the last thing that I typically will switch it out for is Sharpshooting Frenzy, which it really just extends that rapid fire mode with every kill you get. But you need to be very good at getting kills, because every time you fire, it's going to go down significantly. And I can't seem to get too many kills. Like, you can't run, you can't move around really fast. You're pretty much kind of in place as this ability is active. So I typically like to be on the move, and I won't switch this out as often. But then for the heroes versus villains, it's pretty much the exact same. I recommend keeping the sharpshooters calm and also keeping the airburst, as well as the heavily modified blaster. However, I will occasionally swap out for smuggler's wits for the sharpshooters calm, because the sharpshooters calm is like I said, it's a very stationary ability, and with these villains, they're consistently attacking you with lightsabers, and some of them have guns, but a lot of the time you will have at least one saber hero going after you, so you need to be mobile, and that's what that extra dodge is for. Yes, it slows down your cooldown, or it increases your cooldown for abilities, which sucks, but if you have that extra roll, that cooldown isn't as important because you're dodging those saber heroes much more frequently. And that's going to do it for Han. Let's move on to Lando. Lando is another one of those who's fairly simple, and you want to typically stick with the same kind of cards. For Supremacy, I run the Hot and Cold, which is just his maximum health, or his base maximum health, to 150. Without it, he is like Chewbacca. He's very hard to use, and he's hard to stay alive and get kill streaks with. I recommend that actually for both Supremacy and HVV. The next one I recommend is actually Buckle Up Baby, because before it wasn't a heat reduction to his gun. His gun is already incredible. You can fire, I think it's about 9 or 10 shots without having to reset the heat. And then every time you defeat a trooper or deal 100 damage to villains, it reduces that heat per shot by 2%. So again, just get 17 kills or deal 1,700 damage to villains. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It could be a combination of the two. Then you'll get that 35% or 34% damage reduction, which is an incredible difference for his gun. Then the Disabler, I actually recommend only using the Disabler in HVV matches, because you need to freeze those heroes and get some damage done on them. Whereas if you freeze a heavy or an assault trooper who's only got 150 to 200 health, that freeze is kind of wasted. You want to use that little shock probe as more of a radar rather than a shock. But the last one I recommend is Wide-Eyed. It just increases his range of his sharp shot, which is essential in Supremacy, because sharp shot is an insta-kill for everything but specialist and heroes. So that is a very good ability to use for him. And then the only thing I would change for heroes versus villains is the Buckle Up Baby. That's not too good because you're not really needing that blaster heat, I'd say. Once you fire off the 9 shots that it takes to get his gun to reset the heat, typically the shock probe has no longer been shocking the villain and they're on the move again, so you don't ever need any more heat than his gun has, in my experience at least. Moving on to Leia. Leia has had a big change since the beginning of the game. She never used to have these thermal detonators. She actually had a flash grenade, which was garbage. It sometimes wouldn't even flash the opponents, and then when it did, it was only for a couple seconds, so it was not the best ability. Anyway, the cards I'd recommend for Supremacy are High Spirit, which just increases her base maximum health to, I think it's 700, because she starts off at 6, if I'm not mistaken. Then we go over to her new thermal detonators, which is really great because the blast radius isn't all that big compared to a normal thermal detonator. So I think that that increased radius is pretty essential, at least if you want to be using those. I typically stay away from her reduced cooldown time because it will only cool down if you've used all 3. So if you've thrown 1 grenade and you still have 2 available, it won't recharge that 1 until you throw the other 2. So I end up not using this. I just kind of throw the 3 right off the bat, and then it cools down and it's charging, and I use their other abilities in the meantime because they last a long time. That next one I would use is Stay Together, and that's just for Supremacy. I don't think I really use that too often in HVV because there's only 3 teammates you can have. So unless you're near 66% of your team, this card becomes useless to you. But if you are in Supremacy, you are typically surrounded by, you have a team of 20, and that's just the actual people that are playing. You've also got AI, and they do count for this star card. So if you're near 1 AI and 1 friendly, then that counts as 2 friendly units. That 10% damage reduction is huge. It doesn't sound like a lot, but the fact that it's also shared with her allies is a big deal. And then the last one for Supremacy is the Relentless Firing, and that E11 gun, that rapid fire, is just crazy overpowered. And I really thought they were going to nerf it for the longest time, and now that they're saying the game is in its final form, it just looks like they're not going to. So this is a great card to swap in and out with, maybe swap out Stay Together or even the Fearless, but I typically stay away from High Spirit. Now for HVV, I keep High Spirit in there, but instead of Fearless, I will swap out Rebel Heart, which is, I want to say essential because you are constantly using that middle ability, the E11 rapid fire. So while you've got that activated, your damage received is 25% less. And with those heroes, it is a big deal because of the sabers cutting through you while you're trying to shoot them. The next one is the cooldown time for handy device. I know I typically said stay away from those, but since I'm throwing 3 at a time anyway, you want to constantly have as many explosives as possible in heroes versus villains. And that last one that I consider switching every now and then is Relentless Firing. And again, that E11 is just such an essential tool for Leia that you want to constantly have it active at all times. And the best way to do that is increase the firing time. So that's it for Leia. Let's move on to Luke, a fan favorite right here. Now, Luke, I actually had a difficult time because I like so many of his star cards, but for Supremacy, the one that's essential is Intensify. That is something that I will never swap out when I'm using Luke ever. You'll get 2 extra damage to his lightsabers, or his lightsaber slash, every time you defeat an enemy, or deal 200 damage to villains. So because of that 200 damage rather than 100, it becomes kind of useless in HVV, unless you can get some great kill streaks going, but that's typically not what HVV is for. So I stick with Supremacy and Galactic Assault with this one. The next one I look at is Jedi Fighter. Stamina is a big deal in Supremacy as well as HVV, so I use that for both. And then Extended Push Reach, increased area of effect as 30%. That's huge because the battlefield is massive and you don't want to constantly be having to get really close to enemies to deal damage to them. So this extended range helps. I will occasionally switch those 2 out for strong repulse, but I'll more likely swap out Extended Push for the strong repulse because, again, that area of effect is huge. It allows for less movement. Even though Luke has a pretty quick movement speed, it just helps out a little bit more. Now, as far as heroes versus villains go, I'll take out Intensify because, again, it's not too great for getting kill streaks in heroes versus villains. but I will swap it out for the Rush Immunity. That damage reduction is big since you're constantly using Rush in Heroes vs. Villains. And then I will keep the Jedi Fighter because stamina is a massive thing in HVV. I'll also have extended push reach, and then I will occasionally swap that out for strong push, so with the greater knockback, which is pretty big for those kind of maps like Kashyyyk, where you're on platforms and you can push people off, or trying to think of, it's not Camino. Oh yeah, Camino is a good one, but then Naboo, the big open area. There's a whole bunch of maps where you can just push people out of bounds, and that actually counts as a kill towards your team. So that knockback is a big deal for Luke in at least Heroes vs. Villains. But that's it for Luke. Let's move on to Rey. Rey is actually a little bit challenging for me because I don't ever use her too often. I'm always using Finn or now BB-8, but I haven't had too much time playing with BB-8 more recently. But the cards I pick are Farsight because maps are huge on Supremacy and you want to get as many of the enemies in your view as possible. Then I'll also go with the Self Fighter, and I actually keep Self Fighter in on both HVV and Supremacy because stamina is huge for Rey. She doesn't really have too many aggressive abilities. She does have the Saber Rush, which, I mean, it's an aggressive ability, it's good, but the other two are very passive. The Insight, which you can see enemies, and Mind Trick, which just confuses enemies and slows them down. But unless you go and slash with your Saber, it's not an attacking tool. So the fourth one I will pick is Resilient Dash, and again, that's just for Supremacy because that is her aggressive tool right there. But I will occasionally swap it out for Deep Mind. That is what I have active right now. That 30% increase if you're using Insight, which is great because you're seeing 40% more of the field than you would have before. But I pretty much keep Insight on at all times, and then I'll go towards enemies. I'll use Deep Mind, and then they'll be stunned for, it's a long time. Like, I'm sure those enemies get upset with how long they're stunned. I can usually slash through about 4 to 6 enemies at one time if I get them all with Mind Trick. Now, the Heroes versus Villains differs a little bit. I do keep Street Fighter on, but I go with Deep Mind at all times, and then I'll occasionally swap it out for Opportunist. I said that way off. I'll occasionally swap it out for Opportunist, which, I mean, you can see right there, it just deals bonus damage when you've used Mind Trick on an immobilized enemy. But another good one is Strong Mind. Basically, you want to use Mind Trick as much as possible when you're playing Heroes versus Villains. It's your greatest tool in that game mode. And that's it for Rey. So now we're going to move on to Yoda. Now for Yoda, he's his first two cards are at least pretty similar. I always start with Lightsaber Mastery. You want that decreased stamina drain as often as you can get it, especially with Yoda. It seems to drain really quick when you're just slashing with him. But this increases the stamina at least by 15%. And then you also want Jedi Mentor, where he receives less overall damage. I will rarely ever take these two off. The one where it differs is for the Agility. I'll keep that on when I'm playing Supremacy, just because it allows me to get around a little bit easier from place to place. Another one I'll swap it out for is Earned It. I have, because Unleash growing quicker, especially in Supremacy when there's a whole lot of blaster fire, that 30% is a big deal. It makes it a lot bigger than you would think it would get to. But then for Heroes versus Villains, it's pretty much the same. I'll still use the Lightsaber Mastery, that increased stamina, and then the less overall damage received. But I will go to Opposing the Dark Side for that bonus damage against enemy heroes. And then sometimes I might even do Area of Unleash minimum size is larger, because you're not absorbing a whole lot of blaster fire. You're more so blocking saber strikes. So that minimum range is pretty much going to be the biggest it's going to get. It won't ever grow too much in HVV. So I like Unleashed for that. And that's it for Yoda. Moving on to Finn. Finn's a pretty simple hero. I see a lot of people don't really know how to use him. They use him and then they die pretty quick. But now with the health on elimination that every single hero has, he's a much better hero to play as. The 3 cards I run no matter what on Supremacy. It doesn't even matter the situation. No more running. After 3 kills with Deadeye, its damage is increased to 12. That'll only happen once. It doesn't keep reoccurring every time you get 3 kills. But that 12 still helps. Then Stay Calm. The extended duration per kill of up to 40% is huge. That means every time you kill an enemy with Deadeye, it extends back up to 40%. And typically, it's almost always at 100 for me. Then the last one is Finn's Deadeye has larger lock-on radius by 25%. That's another huge one because rather than just firing blindly, you can aim. Well, I guess it helps you aim a little bit better. Deadeye is basically aim assist in a hero's ability. I stay away from the other 2 abilities at all costs just because it takes away from Deadeye. And anytime I don't have Deadeye, I'm avoiding a fight trying to recharge Deadeye so I can go back in and fight some more. The only one I'll even consider swapping in and out is In Charge because now it's got a maximum damage reduction of up to 36%. Before, he didn't have any damage reduction, and he only has 600 health, so he dies pretty quick unless you're consistently getting kills with Deadeye. And then it goes the same for heroes versus villains. It's the exact same. I use these 3 mostly, and then occasionally I'll swap this out, but I'll do that way less often in HVV than I will in Supremacy. And that's it for Finn. Like I said, pretty simple. Moving on to Kenobi, we've got Jedi Resilience. He's got a increased health regeneration of 100, which is so helpful in both HVV and in Supremacy. I never take this card off. The next one is Perfect Defense. Increased stamina. His stamina is already wild, but then you add an extra 40% to it and you almost never have to worry about it. That goes for blocking as well as striking, which makes that card, in my opinion, broken. The next one I like is Safeguard. Now this is one that I actually recommend swapping in and out for Supremacy and Galactic Assault, just depending on this situation, because we've already got that 40% for Perfect Defense. This will increase it by an additional 40% after you get up to 20 times 5, so 100 blaster shots blocked, or 2 abilities or lightsaber attacks blocked with his lightsaber. So it's either 100 blaster shots or 2 abilities or lightsaber attacks with his block. So it's just, they're interchangeable, but every 2 lightsaber attacks counts as 5 blaster shots. And then the next one that I recommend swapping in and out is Forward. And this one I'll typically keep on, at least for Supremacy. You won't see me swapping it out too much, but if I am going to swap it out, it would be for Safeguard. And then I don't use it too often in Heroes versus Villains, but More Doubts is a great one to swap Forward out for because the resistive mind trick is just super annoying if you are on the villain side of Kenobi. Anakin is probably the easiest hero to play as. You really can't go wrong with any of these abilities. If you're brand new to the game, I recommend Tenacious. Just get used to playing as a hero, try and get long kill streaks, and then once you start to figure them out, maybe swap Tenacious out and focus on these 3. The Steamroll, which just increases his stamina, which drains surprisingly fast. And if you are using Steamroll, you could also use it in combination with Massive Strikes, because it pretty much one-hits everything except Heavy, Specialist, and Heroes, of course. So Assault, Officer, and the Sniper. But then Raw Strength, Heroic Might deals more base damage, up to 50. That will make it a one-hit again for the 3 classes except Heavy. And then Pull Dominance. If you get 2 units pulled, it'll deal 50 more damage, which again makes that one a 1-tap as well. So the whole point of all these cards is to make almost everything Anakin does a 1-hit, which in my opinion makes him broken, which is why I don't use Tenacious anymore, but I've also had a lot of experience using Anakin. So Tenacious is what I would swap out as that 4th card. However, in Heroes versus Villains, I recommend starting off with Tenacious and not taking him off. Then having the Massive Strikes. Even though it's got a 25% stamina reduction, you can counter that with Steamroll and then just try and get those kill streaks going up in Heroes versus Villains. I know it's kind of difficult, but it's a little bit easier if you've got Anakin's abilities set up right. And then the other one I might swap out Steamroll or Massive Strikes for is Attraction. And that's just to get a wider range for pulling enemies in because they keep dodging away, or maybe they're running from you and you're just trying to pull them back. That makes it a great tool. And last but not least, BB-8. I know I don't have a max level, but I do have a solid amount of playtime with him. And the only card I haven't maxed is Undercover, or sorry, not Undercover, Uncover. And I don't get too much usage out of it, so he's about as maxed as I want him to be. But anyway, the cards I use for him are the same across game modes for the first 2 at least. Self-repairs, I will not take off. That extra health regeneration is great for him because he just absorbs blaster fire, and people seem to go for him quite often. The other one I won't take off is Whirlwind because both the damage and radius of Cable Spin are increased, and I actually get more kills with Cable Spin than I do with his Shock Probe, which is crazy. But speaking of Shock Probe, that's one of the ones I will occasionally swap out for my 3rd one. I more prefer the Spinner, however, instead of the Shock Probe card. And then the last one I typically look at is Trusty Droid, and that just makes you a very good support hero. You just have to be around units frequently, or else that card becomes useless. So as I said before, I will keep 1 and 4 right here, Whirlwind and Self-Repairs on throughout any game mode. And I will occasionally swap out for Spinner, but the 4th one that I'll swap out for in Heroes versus Villains is Roll Together, and that's because of the faster cooldown support. In HVV, you're typically with your other 3 teammates at all times, and if their abilities are refreshing quicker, odds are you guys will have the advantage when it comes to dealing damage to the other team. So it makes for a stronger team. But again, I don't run that as my main. I kind of swap that out here and there. Anyway, I think, oh yeah, that is it. So I've been working on the villain side of this, and I will try and get that out as quick as possible. But as y'all could tell, this video came out kind of late, so the other one I can't see being any later than a week from now. But I do hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to drop a like, and if not, let me know what you would change in the comments. Anyway, that'll do it for this one, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.